my video too.
This evening, we welcome Mike Waite from Surrey Wildlife Trust, and he's going to talk to us about the fascinating story of the great fox spider in Britain. So, Mike, over to you.
Well, thanks, Kieran. Thanks very much. And hello, everybody. Yeah. So I'm Mike Waite. I work for Surrey Wildlife Trust. And as you can see there, I'm the Director of Research and Monitoring at the Trust now. So Kieran got me along here. I've been studying this spider now for the last 4 years or so. And it's really just got my attention and captured my imagination massively. I mean, the reason I'm here, I guess, was hang on, let's see why I can't forward this.
You just make sure you've got the cursor in the screen and you click in the screen, it should work.
No. Where's that? There we go. We're going to do it this way. Sorry, everyone. Sorry for that hold up. Yeah, so this is what really spilt the beans back in 2020 and put the great fox spider very much in the media map. It's probably more about the fact that at that point, you know, we were in COVID lockdown situations and everybody was desperate for a bit of good news. And sure enough, you know, Back from the Dead, presumed extinction was certainly in that category. So, and with a very, you know, our press officer too was very on the ball with this. But as soon as I did rediscover this thing, after having been looking for it for a couple of years at that point, I knew that it was very media worthy because it is such a beautiful spider. It got on Autumn Watch that autumn, that November, and made all the headlines too. The Guardian covered it, and even the Red Tops, all using the press release photo, that poster boy spider there. That was the actual one, the first one I found that I photographed, and it even got into Wikipedia. Oh, that's nice. Marvelous. So it is a very rare spider, and at that point, at its discovery in 2020, you know, it hadn't been seen since 1990, and it wasn't a random exercise. You know, the trust in Surrey, we did a state of nature report in 2017 that I authored, and since then I've been systematically trying to look and update records for some, you know, our priority species, our section 40 species, you know, that hadn't been seen, and their records were becoming very old. So, you know, the great fox spider fitted into that, and that was why I was putting so much effort into it. But as you can see there, it has its national distribution, just down in Dorset, and then the Surrey record as well. Subsequently, it's critically endangered under the IUCN regional review for spiders, and that, you know, was for the fact that it is so rare and so threatened. We'll come on to that, some of those threats a bit later on in the talk. Right, so it was discovered, the great fox spider was discovered in 1868, actually. So that dot down in Dorset on the national distribution map was Bloxworth Heath. There in front of you, that's now part of the Greater Wareham Forest Estate, Forestry Commission Estate, and this is the first publication of its finding by the Reverend Octavius Pickard Cambridge, the great godfather of British arachnology, and he describes it there, and he gives the date of its discovery, and then he adds at the end that since this book came a little way after that, he says how it's been found elsewhere in adjacent sites, and this is pretty much where most of those records came from. This is the National Nature Reserve, Morden Bog, northwest of Wareham. A wonderful place, a really wonderful site. And it is actually a notified feature of that SSSI, the Morden Bog SSI. It's a named feature, along with another tiny, much smaller spider that hasn't been seen there, Altella lucida. So that's where most of those earliest records came from. And then at some point after 1958, we're not quite sure, and we can't pin down who actually found it, but the population in Surrey, over 110 kilometers away, was found, and on Hankley Common here. And that's where, at the time of the 2020 rediscovery, that was where the most recent record was from, like I said, in 1990. It just so happens that a load of records by the eminent arachnologist Dick Jones came to light at around that time, and some of those dates changed because Dick's records then made it into the database, and he actually found the great fox spider on Morden Bog in '99. So then that was the most recent record, but at the time of the rediscovery, it was 30 years since it had been found, and was then, therefore, this is what, it's potentially thought to be extinct. Certainly down in Dorset, because the record on record then was 1965, the most recent record for Morden. So wolf spiders. The great fox spider is one of the wolf spiders, the Lycosids, the Lycosidae, and this is just a quick spin around that family. This is most of the genera in that we have in Britain, at least. And those of you that know spiders will be familiar with some of these. The Pardosas got quite a few species. They're mostly diurnal generalists. Trocosa, there's 3. No. Anyway, don't trip over there. There's 5 species of those. They're all nocturnal. I'd love to see Trocosa robusta. That's the big one, and it's slightly bigger than even the great fox spider, but that's a pretty rare spider now. But this is, they occupy all niches. I normally show this slide to illustrate, the fact the ubiquity of spiders in all, covering everywhere. They're so ubiquitous. They find niches in all habitats. Alopecosa there, the 4 British species of Alopecosa tend to be on semi-natural habitats, and not vastly modified habitats. And then we've got Parata there, which is the sort of wetland version, the otter spiders. So Alopecosa, here they are, the 4. Pulver ulenta, I never know how to pronounce that, up in the top corner, top left corner there. That's the only one that's reasonably ubiquitous across the country. The rest are quite restricted. Cuniata is kind of on heathland and species-rich grassland, chalk grassland. Barbapes is the Easter fox spider. I think that's because its first maturation is peaks around that sort of April, Easter time. That's why it's given that name. But that's the only one that could possibly be confused with the great fox spider. They've all got nice patterning. They've all got, it's sort of quite obscure in pulverulenta, but it's quite prominent in Cuniata. It's described as a dagger in here on Barbapes. The other thing about Alopecosa is the males often have a modified tibial segment there. This is the Barbapes male, and that's what gives it its Barbapes name. It's spiky barbs on that, sort of dark spiky barbs. And Cuniata there's the male, and it's actually a swollen bulb. And normally these kind of modifications, you see it in the solsticids, the jumping spiders as well. You know, it's normally about the males doing quite elaborate, in some cases, semaphoric signaling to the females when they're approaching them to mate, just to sort of get the okay, get the green light that, you know, they're not there to be eaten, and they are there to be mated, you know, to mate with. So this is the boy, then girl. This is Alopecosa fabrilis, the great fox spider. And we can see the contrast there between the male and female. The male's generally paler, and with a wider leg span, perhaps. He's up to 16 millimeters nose to tail. She's more like 18 millimeters nose to tail. She's much chunkier. This is quite a feature of the females. This sort of like tram lines just on the top of the head there, between those top eyes. But although a lot of lycosids have these white spots on their abdomen like this, they're very, very prominent in Alopecosa fabrilis, more so than the only confusable barbipes. You know, you can see them there, these paired white buttons, quite prominent on the female, quite prominent on the male. And this is a juvenile. This is probably only about 3.5 millimeters long, this juvenile, but he's all, actually that's a she, I think. Yeah, I think that's the start of the tram lines there. But she's, let's assume it's a she, she's already got her buttons, you see, and that's far more, and that is then diagnostic when you're comparing a much smaller spider, juveniles, with possible barbipes. But the other thing is this black underside. Fabrilis is unique with this. And there's the underside of a male, look, jet black there. And it's ditto on the female. It's the female here. And it turns from this sort of wine red color to black underneath. And that's probably got to do with exothermic thermoregulation. There's a reference that I gave Karen on this, which is more about, it's all about reptiles actually, but what, you know, a white underside would reflect more radiation back from, you know, heat from the ground, sourced from the ground, and a black underside less so. So that's the only possible reason I can think of why a large spider, in the case of the great fox spider, you know, it matters. It probably matters to it. It's thermoregulation. The other thing is that, you know, it's most active at night in the cooler times too. So it's quite important that it gets all the it retains the most heat it can. So autecology of spider. This is interestingly, this has been most researched in Belgium, and yeah, well, mainly Belgium, and mainly by this bloke Dries Bonte. He did his doctorate on the spider assemblages of dune systems, and there's a number of papers on this, and he's looked at metapopulation stability, you know, how vulnerable it is when you've got sort of broken up habitat, microhabitat is discontinuous, and with a big spider like Alopecosa fabrilis too, you know, the juveniles don't seem to disperse by ballooning. So, you know, he's done a lot of work on this, which is really quite interesting. So in the UK, there are definitely a dry heathland species, and this is the optimum type of habitat that we see fabrilis on. So bare sand juxtaposed with sort of leggy heather, but discontinuous leggy heather, and fused bryophyte like encrusted sand as well, just like grey dunes, in fact, you know, doing a very good impression of that. The heather is important because the juveniles find cover, and you know, they sort of spend a lot of time under here, and you know, that's essential cover from them to evade predation, I would think. Whereas, you know, you can find the adults actually walking over these more open areas at night. So lycosids, there's no webbing netting involved in catching their prey. They're simply fast pursuit predators. This one's got hold of, it looks like a wasp here, this male, some kind of wasp. I didn't bother taking it off it to look, but you know, that's what the wolf spiders, lycosids do. They use their silk in other ways. They are burrowers. The genus is they're all burrowers. They all dig a burrow, and that arrow is showing the burrow that this female has come out of, and she will line this burrow with silk, her silk, as females are believed to overwinter, and well, they do, because although the best time to see adults of this species, their sort of peak maturation as adult time is August through to October in mild autumns. Females can be seen rarely in late winter as well, on mild, you know, sort of weather we get in maybe a few weeks' time, back end of early March. They can be seen in daylight, and they will have overwintered. So because it's such a large spider, they take about 2 years to reach maturity anyway. This is a male here. Now he's approaching this burrow here, and there's very likely to be a female in there. And his behavior, he was very gingerly approaching this. And this was on a very memorable night when, you know, I saw all sorts of behavior, interesting behavior. Over here on the right, there's actually 2 spiders in there, and they are mating. You can just about see them, probably not on this slide, but I could when I saw it actually happening. So this male here, he's approaching a female in her burrow. So yes, I was saying, you know, they are nocturnal. The adults are nocturnal. The juveniles not so much. You can sort of pull up, gently lift up those heather bushes and find juveniles there active in the daytime, but adults are pretty much nocturnal, and that's possibly the advantage of being of the black underside, retaining heat, you know, because it's cooler. They're very thermophilic species. There's no question of that. I mean, that's probably why, one of the reasons perhaps why they're so rare in the UK. We're at very much a sort of edge of range for them, just about on the, you know, they're more accustomed to a continental type climate probably, because their global distribution is right across you know, Eurasia through to China, I believe, and in sort of sandy desert-like conditions throughout. And because of that nocturnality, you know, they're quite difficult to survey for, and that might account for one of the reasons, you know, why they're well, I hesitate to say they're under-recorded. I mean, they genuinely are a rare species in the UK. But it was when I switched to pitfalling on Hankley that's what led to directly to the rediscovery. And there's the boy, the first one that I rediscovered on the right there, the male, the bottom of the pit, just using plastic beer glasses set into the ground there for pitfalling. Now, pitfalling often uses what's called a preservative, you know, antifreeze or something like that. But you can't use that here because on all these sites there's very rare reptile interest. There's me looking at my pitfalls there, but you know, you'll actually get juvenile sand lizards falling into these things. They're probably attracted by the invertebrates at the bottom, because there's a lot of carabids. These collect trap as well as other ground spiders and things, and so the little juveniles are often found in there. So it's important to visit them in the mornings can't leave them for long to set these things free. As we know, sand lizards very highly protected, and the adult sand lizards actually, if you leave the traps down for more than sort of 5 nights, they very often find them, and you find there's no invertebrates left because they've eaten them all and exited because they can. And the juveniles get caught, and a lot of bycatch coming in. By looking for the great fox spiders, made lots of new records of some pretty rare things. Zora sylvestris is another critically endangered spider, the scarecrow spider. Very restricted records in Nottinghamshire, I believe, and also on lowland heathland in Surrey. Zelotes longipes is nationally rare. I think it's vulnerable, actually, endangered, vulnerable. And the heath grasper is another priority species, Aplodrossus dalmatensis. I've found that. I've made new records of that as well. These are readily caught in pitfalls. So over the time from 2020s, from this rediscovery, I've carried on studying the spider on Hankley and adjacent sites too, and I've got a pretty good idea of its distribution across this site. Now, Hankley Common is it's about 560 hectares, and it is a MOD training site. It's part of the Thursley Common, Thursley, Hankley, and Frensham Commons SSI. Thursley Common is the National Nature Reserve in the east on that. And there's a golf course that abuts Hankley Common that you can see labelled there as well. So in 2020, that was the big year, that was the rediscovery. X's mark where I pitfalled or searched and found nothing. But the other lines are sort of approximate distributions resulting from that year. So that's where I found it, in the north there. 2021, I carried on intensively pitfalling, and so lots of X's there, especially on the adjacent sites, because I did want to look at the adjacent sites. But to date, we haven't found anything on Frensham and Churt, even though there's, it's pretty much contiguous, this site, albeit with some barriers, but certainly plenty of suitable habitat, microhabitat on those sites, and less so on Thursley. So it's more of a wetland, wet heathland site than a dry. But Frensham certainly has got a lot of decent habitat on it. But in 2021, essentially, I found this southern population that you can see down there on Hankley. And 2022, pushing out that distribution even further. 2022 was a big fire. I'll talk about this a bit further later on. There was a big fire on Hankley, 88 hectares in that central area, and this was me trying to desperately make sure that the spider was still present. The fire didn't affect the southern population, but it certainly came up to the northern population there. I also looked at further sites, you can see up in the north and south, but, just not. So, it's not everywhere. Often people assume these, things, these species are widespread on the site, but, in this case, definitely not. And then this year, I got round to looking on the golf course, which I always wanted to do, but hadn't done. And sure enough, the northern population there, it does emerge out onto the golf course. Now we know that golf course is part of the SSI, it's notified, and it's very good for heath tiger beetle. So it's got some very good roughs and things. So there was no reason why it shouldn't support spider, and sure enough it does. So the northern is what I call the Lion's Mouth. That's just a local place name up there. I call that the Lion's Mouth population, and then in the south we've got the Kettlebury, and that's the Kettlebury Ridge that line is along. It's a high line, and this is where the spider is on Hankley Common. It probably is across this whole southern, this is a south facing stretch here, and it's probably all the way along here. But the lion's mouth is probably further along here. These little marks you can see as part of the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trusts, because they manage Hankley. This is where they've made scrapes for sanders and things. And so I should imagine it's sort of further along here as well. But nothing here. Nothing here. This is had fires. It's used for filming and all sorts of activity, training activities. So nothing in the middle. So they are disconnected. Now, Dorset. In 2022, I did some pitfall trapping down there with Natural England's blessing. It's their National Nature Reserve. So thanks to Tez Otter, the reserves manager down there, he was all too keen for me to have a go down there, and I put out these traps, but for 3 nights got nothing on Morden. It's only in the north of the Morden site that there would be microhabitat that would support, well, from my experience on Hankley, would support great fox spider. But I did go in 2021 and recce just down there in the spring. Didn't expect to see any spiders at that time, but it was on a site, another site managed by the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust called Great Ovens, which is just to the south east of Morden Bog, across the main road connecting Bear Regis down to Wareham. This is where I thought that if we were going to refine the great fox spider, this would be it, because it was far more like Hankley Common, much drier, south-facing, nice south-facing slopes, much stonier ground there, broken up, leggy heather. You know, I thought this will be the place. So while I was pitfalling on Morden, the last night I did a nocturnal search I haven't mentioned yet, but after having, I almost don't need to pitfall so much now, because I've discovered that if you use a head torch, an LED head torch, forward-facing head torch, it is pretty easy once you get your eye in to pick up the eye shine of these things. All wolf spiders put this eye shine back, little green dots, tiny little emerald green dots. And you've got to be wearing the head torch, because it's something about having the reflection directly off a forward-facing LED. People standing next to you don't see it often. But if you use this, and then it tends to freeze the spider once they get, they're in the torch beam. You can approach and you can find the spider. Often it's Trichosa, or often it's Alopecosa barbapiece, or something like this. Some of the other nocturnal Lycosids, but I found this tiny juvenile. It's only probably about 3 millimeters. This was on there, and I mean, it probably would seem obvious to you now, having seen that juvenile that I showed you. You know, I was reasonably confident this was a great fox spider, but because it was a juvenile, we always have a degree of caution about, not being able to see the reproductive structures, which is the critical diagnostic with spiders. So I took it and I thought, well, I'll try and I'll rear this, because you can do that, but you rear it to maturity. But over 2 years, because they take 2 years to maturity, that was always going to be a bit of a challenge. And by the December, because I found this in September, by December it had died on me. So, but I did send it off to the Natural History Museum, and they were able to match the DNA, and they came through in the March of 23, confirmed that it was. So that was great. And so in September of 23, in that adult maturity period, I went out again torching, and I had the reserves manager, the Ark Trust reserves manager, with me that time, Chris Dresch, and sure enough, we got some adults that time. We got 2 females and a male, but only in a very restricted part of right at the top of the northern end of the site. It's probably a relic population, but Chris is going to do his best to find more spiders now. So these were the first, adult great fox spiders in Dorset since '99 that we found last year. It's just worth saying while we got the time that there's the pompilids, the spider hunters, wasps. They often have a particular species or a group of species that they major on, and Arachnospela rufa, it specializes on great fox spiders. And Dries Bonte, the Belgian guy, he established a link between those, and when they see Arachnospela flying around, they assume that that Alopecosa fabrilis is around, because that link is so strong. Now, it's extinct in the UK. 1938 was the last record, but it was only ever recorded from Great Ovens Heath and the northern Morden Bog. So maybe that was reason enough to actually concentrate on Great Ovens Heath, if we thought about it. So that's that. I just want to come on to some of the vulnerabilities of the population at Hankley, justifying its critically endangered status, really. As I said before, Hankley Common belongs to the MOD. It's a training estate, and it's not a range site, so there isn't restricted access to it, like red flags, and we do have a number of very large range sites in Surrey in the Thames Basin Heath, and one of them you can visit, but it's only in the evenings when they're not shooting. The other is strictly inaccessible. But Hankley is open access. It's got a lot of public rights of way across it, and it's used by horse riders, mountain bikers, loads of people. So there, but you get lots of debris from the training use of the site. This is quite a common site. Piles of ammunition. This peaked last year, especially because they were training number of Ukrainian troops over here. The British were training them. So it's also a favourite filming site, because you get this sort of vista, this expanse, seemingly endless expanse of heather. It's been used. It was used very famously. They like to talk about it was used in that final scene of Skyfall, James Bond film. I was there looking for the great fox spider in about 2019, I think it was, and there was a location there, and they were filming Black Widow. They were doing that, but I didn't see Scarlett Johansson. She must have been in the trailer at the time. But there was this here. I believe this was a Netflix production. These are supposed to be the gates of hell, I think. Somebody told me. So this was up in 21, the year after I rediscovered it, and I thought, oh my God, it was right over the Lion's Mouth population. But communications got back quickly to the film crew that they needed to take care there, and they did. So this is that fire. This is the big fire in 22. The whole of this basin at the bottom. You were looking at this ridge here is the Kettlebury Ridge, where the southern population is, and I'm looking almost from the Lion's Mouth population at the top. So this is a big basin in the middle, and that was completely burnt out. This is called the drop zone, because I think it was used for parachute training during the war, and also, resupply parachute drop training they use it for that as well, even now, I think, but I may have that wrong. But you can see how extensive that 88-hectare fire was. took out all of that central zone, and maybe fires in that area in the past, repeat fires, is what's taken out if the spider was there in the past. This is the lion's mouth population, and so the spider was definitely present in this area here. So miraculously, the fire was put out just as it met the northern population, and just took out some of the area, but the majority of it, because the golf course is over here, the majority of it was unscathed. But that was so close. You know, it had Hampshire's fire and rescue service as well as Surrey's thrown into the effort to put it out at the time. Potentially, I suppose, because it is, you know, public access, because it's important to training and stuff like that. So it's because they were at that time, you know, over just under 1,000 hectares of heathland went up in Surrey, mostly on MOD sites. You know, so it was a terrible year for wildfires in Surrey, and there was something raging when Hankley went up, and the fire service were taken off that to fight the fire on Hankley Common. So yeah, that's down here is the military training base, drop zone base down here, and this is all fire damage. I mean, these things are used now. You might think, well, if you're using pyrotechnics for training purposes on a tinder dry heathland site, you're kind of asking for trouble. But I believe the MOD are aware of this, and you know that they certainly have signage, the usual kind of signage warning, you know, fire risk very high and all that to meet the public access usage of the site. So, you know, one assumes that troops would not be using these kind of things in those conditions. So, what can be done to, you know, to meet this future threats of future fire for such a vulnerable species that is so confined to such, you know, to one site? Even the adjacent, you know, it seems to be absent on its adjacent sites, and ditto down in Dorset, it doesn't seem to be, although we need to obviously do more surveys now down there across the Wareham Forest Estate, to, you know, because the survey effort down there is comparably small, but you know, it is extremely vulnerable from what we know of its distribution. There's no question. So what can be done? Well, we've got a landscape scale project, nascent landscape scale project in the preparation. Well, it's going now. It's still early days though. It's Heathland Connections. Natural England are heading this up. It's got landscape recovery funding. You know, the large elm, the largest of the elm scale funding streams to go about restoring and creating more heathland within the Wealden heathlands of Surrey and spilling over into Hampshire as well. And alongside that, special targeted species work for some of the most important species. And some of those are these. The natterjack toad is, you know, it's been reintroduced once already in Surrey, but the two sites where that has occurred, it's really just hanging on. So the intention is to have another reintroduction of natterjacks. Broken banded wasp hoverflies, obviously hoverfly specialists will know this is a priority species, very, very rare. It's on Hankley Common here, and then down in the New Forest area and Poole Basin again. Hankley is its only site in Surrey, I was actually looking for this species on Hankley this last summer, but didn't find it. But that should be still present. And then heath tigers. This is a really important site for heath tigers because it's a very strong population. Mind you, I don't know what the fire, the 22 fire did to that, but it's on the golf course. It's on Thursley Common as well. It's a very strong population that has been used to source animals for reintroduction on some of the West Sussex sites and Heathland sites, things like this. So what we are intending to do, and it's very, very early days, but I've had conversations with Helen Smith of the British Arachnological Society, who of fen raft spider fame, who's worked a lot on fen raft spider and introduced and reintroduced that spider into former sites for that. And certainly this is the approach with the very, very rare ladybird spider that was rediscovered in a very, very small site, confidential site. And that's been introduced into other sites nearby down in Dorset as well. And, as insurance populations, to have it spread around, not therefore be quite so vulnerable to catastrophic wildfires, this would be the thing to do. And so we've had some conversations. I've been talking with the ranger of Frensham Common, where I said there was so much apparently suitable habitat, and that Waverley Borough managed Frensham for the National Trust, and that would be a logical site to introduce a small population of the great fox spider. We need to obviously bottom out the threats to the populations on the Hankley to be collecting animals, to be able to do this and see how affordable, animals might be, and see if we can breed them in captivity even. All these things need to be considered for prepping a project, a working, that would be headed up by a sort of species working group for the spider, if we were to do that. But hopefully, we'll start thinking about that and do some test runs at least, captive breeding, this coming year. So I'm almost finished, but this is a little video if it plays, just because you've seen a lot of still photographs. This is just to prove that the thing does move. This is a lovely female that I found this October. Well into October. It was such a mild autumn this year that there was activity almost up into November actually. But this is her. That marvelous, amazing thing. And those big front eyes, you see, they reflect back these green little points of green light in the headlight beam, head torch beam. Yeah. So, yeah, it's got 10 minutes, I think, for to put there. Look at that. Oh, if you like that kind of thing, which I'm sure you all do, because that's why you're listening to me. Okay, thanks very much.